Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on what does it take, what is required for you to move from where you are to where you're going, without getting sort of held back, hindered, or you just feel like you might have to give up, like you just feel like things might not ever get better. What I wanted is not going to happen now, or you're not, or you're in a relationship and you're not happy with what can suddenly be like a lot of ups and downs. It's difficult to communicate between boundaries. Having to please somebody else and impress somebody else versus not having to do that at all. That takes a lot of pressure off. One thing when you're in a relationship with people who are very controlling, meaning, it's not just like, oh, they're controlling. It's like, meaning like they literally, to the point where they want to take credit for you controlling, or and then there's this whole different sort of dynamic with you having your ownership over your own self, and there's a shame that's sort of interwoven, and then there's always like a triggering or discomfort in the relationship. So how do you sort of unpack that and get through that state of always being sort of like knowing that something could be on the other side of this gathering, this get together, or in my relationship? When we talk about like being triggered, we're talking about like behaving in a way that you wouldn't want the kids to see, you wouldn't want the neighbors to hear, you wouldn't want it to be recorded, or at least, if you had self-respect, that would be, the limit there. But then behaving in ways that are of self-respect are from a completely different standpoint, that one does not ever give up, meaning it's not to be stubborn, but one that is malleable and plausible to communicating and sort of getting its way, otherwise sort of like liberating your free will away from it being sort of overly attached, glued, or asphyxiated to another individual who, was sort of wishing compliance to their efforts in the relationship. Meaning, it seems like gun the gas, and it seems like, oh yeah, we're doing great, and then lets off a little, and it has sort of an instability, or there's just a preponderance, knowing that there is always something, either about the house, about the kids, about the finances, about the dog, about something that not ever gets a chance to ever be ironed out. But the narcissist, they seem to sort of have their way and get away from things that they don't want to be held accountable for, or that, they want to basically pawn off on somebody else. It becomes very stressful then. And how do you then sort of rebuild? How do you repair? How do you know then and get through this sort of erratic behavior, and then being okay with not having this in the background, like, of your life? I mean, it almost feels like, you're rejecting, your very own roots. So then it comes into question, well, where are my roots? And then so you have to explore, see, and know that despite your exposure to what something might be really harsh, irrational, unacceptable, beyond, beyond repair, beyond reproach, something, there's a sense of violation, basically, I would say, that takes the overriding note, if you will, is that quality of, sort of, something like almost you would equate to like a ship or something. But it's not funny that this occurs. Why? Because it leaves people without a voice, and it's always set up for that very manner, meaning they've already got this already pre-planned, and it throws people off their feet, and they sort of they have a lot of confusion or lack of clarity and then being able to make sense and then feeling like liberated again, as if that would be okay. Well, nowadays, yeah, you can be, but you still have to be able to process and own what these violations were, and just really owning that was then, and then with time, this is now, meaning you understand what boundaries are now for you through some time. You're able to recognize it, you're able to vocalize no or no thank you, and not feel guilty, not feel regret, not feel that you're letting somebody down, because you own you, and that's kind of what has to become important to you in your life. It's not overly selfish for you to get away from an abusive relationship. I don't think that that's asking too much, or for you to get space from something that is other than that, because if it's not going to fit your needs, if you find that you're constantly having to impress something else, their needs, their requirements, their rungs on the ladder, their qualifications, and that seems to supersede you and who you are, and as if that should be acceptable, and that it's just sort of requesting blind adherence, or that they're just very that their criticism will bring about your growth, as if it will change, it'll change, and it's just, because otherwise they tend to feel bored. And, a trigger then is then established. It's like a cycle that will become established. It'll be a new pattern that unequivocally you're going to want to get out if you don't like that rough ride. At some point, if you say in your life, you know what, I got it, enough is enough. I'm now, enter your age, enter where you're at in your life, enter just something not that's supposed to impress somebody else, but just for you. Now that I am, something positive, I no longer need to go there in my life. I no longer need to have that. I no longer need to reflect. I no longer need to figure it out. It's okay. And you're okay, like, with putting it aside and permanently just basically giving it up. Basically, it's just saying, all right, enough is enough. And you're going to you want to keep yourself out of that trigger territory, because it's just not suitable for you. It doesn't look good on you. I don't care if you're drinking Coke, Coca-Cola, a glass of wine, getting triggered is an unpleasant state. And, there's a certain point to know, that why that is, and to realize, okay, then where, why is that? Because oftentimes people who are extremely driven or ambitious can be like that. It's hard for them to get away or, decompress from their work. It doesn't suit them, or their energy, and that's okay. Then they might have to have something else rather than just like an exit. They might need to then take up woodworking, or take up writing, or take up gardening, or take up quiet time, or just take up alone time, and then communicate that to others if that's what's required, rather than like slipping out the back door, going someplace where, you just sort of disappear, into the garage, into the cellar, into the garden, into the front yard, into the toolbox, into the makeup kit, wherever it is one then goes, and it's because you just simply, there's nothing to be ashamed about. You need some space, and it's hit a nerve. There's something real and alive there, and it's okay to say that. It's like, wow, there's something real and alive there in me, and I just want to know why that is, and like no longer sort of being taken over or owned by that, where it kind of has you feeling uncomfortable, and saying, okay, then I'm growing in the other direction. Well, then is the perspective owned that the trigger usually is saying there's an identity problem, I would say, at the bottom line. If you find yourself getting triggered, usually there's something about your I am that you feel is challenged, like, I am tough as a rock, and they want you to do something that you would consider soft, meaning not your style, but then you might have to try it on for size. Or does that require you to soften up? And to what degree do you execute that? To what degree can you balance that? If it's not you, or you just don't like the way that you're behaving, then you need to get with yourself and you need to keep that in check and not let that get out. And then you need to take a step back and recompose. I mean, and you need to then learn why that is. But you can't take responsibility for someone else's triggers. You can't take responsibility for when someone else goes off and then you have your whole afternoon ruined, or your whole rest of your summer. In other words, there's going to be a lot of pointed arrows, coming in. And so, and so, and not meant to, help, but meant to scar. Like, some people just have intentions. So if that's the case and you don't like, echoing that back, in other words, it's not good to then stoop to that level and then give malintent back, because that's not you. But don't allow a trigger to own you, and then you then adapt a new trigger, and you're now owning, you're now involved in the same trigger. That's, why would you want to enter into someone else's trigger and take it on for your own? You might think you're trying to help, believe it or not, some people, they're not ready, they don't want it. I mean, simply they are not there. So you have to back up stage left. And if you're feeling, well, this is the time we're supposed to, and then they're not on the page. And then if you're like, several books, libraries off, as it begins to grow, then it's just not a right relationship. Someone is not mature enough, because I would say, going off is needs to come with maturity, but for sometimes people do not grow out of it. They do not. They continue to remarry 11 times. They continue to have stories, and they're 83, and it's just they're asking you, and they're still trying to almost keep doing that. They're still playing as if they're in the kindergarten and they've way long graduated. So you have to say, wow, to what degree is it okay that I can graduate from being, out of inheriting someone else's trigger? Whether it's someone who you've, temporarily housed or inherited their trigger, and you were in a reactive state. That's how much how strong other people energetically can be. Because I don't want to give names, to go through with it, but sometimes you can say strong spoken, strong tongue, whatever other qualities are. You probably have a list, that you have interpreted yourself, real or unreal. That's how you have interpreted it. And then if you find yourself sort of going in the tornado, like into their trigger, like entering in and in the banter, and then finding that maybe you're trying to solve their trigger problems, as if that's a role or a job that you want to apply for. Well, you might need to temporarily alleviate some of the pain, or the stress or tension in the relationship, especially depending how old you are. It can be very difficult for people, I think, who are at their teenage years, who have, that sort of triggered situation, and it can be very difficult for them to get the reins on it or to channel productively, especially if there is no strong player on the team to like guide and assist with handling tension or disappointment or decision making or focus or whatever it is that is required that maybe could or could not be met. And that's okay, like owning that's okay, but what then? And so either way, that is okay, but what, but what then, what then when, or whatever it is you need to say, is how to get like distance and away from that trigger. Do not own someone else's trigger. Do not feel that you have to become someone else to impress them, rather than just being yourself. If you constantly have to show up for a role, that's eventually going to wear out. At some point, and you have to get real. And then if things get real and raw, then you want to understand it, then say, okay, I want to understand this. Usually if people are triggered, it's gonna harken, or it's gonna link back to their childhood. If you see people getting um, uncomfortable at certain situations, usually there's something in their childhood that mirrors that and then elicits the same discomfort. Um, for example, if you were generally had to be alone at a specific time and now you're always required to be with somebody, that can be a real change of focus, especially if you had, some very strong character or willed people, or you yourself found that you had to become that way in order to survive or thrive in the family. But oftentimes, some modifications you take on, might be taken on too long. So you can always take a step back and don't own those problems with which you do not want to own. You can learn to calm them down or extinguish them. In other words, don't give in to them. Don't start running, searching. Don't start with the incessant thoughts. Don't start with the online search. Don't start with the eating. Don't start with the shopping. Don't start with the whatever it is that sends you into a consumption of time, because these relationships can be very consuming. And so I think the flip side is when you start to feel and become known as protective, and someone isn't like looking at you from afar and trying to use it as a lever or manipulate you for it. Like, those sort of relationship dynamics can be supplanted, but you do not have to opt in, or realize, say, it's okay to not hang with that whole group of people then. It might mean a big decision for you to not have a trigger. Or you might have to have a big, oh wow, aha moment about your childhood and say, okay, that's why this, is uncomfortable for me, because this was always a big time or a small time or a sensitive time. And you find out what your sensitivities are and basically what you might call as your pain point. So, and then so it's like growing in this self-awareness and then self-acceptance and bonding, and realize, what enriches your life and what truly serves you and what does not. And then where you want to grow in some leaps and bounds, then really go there, and what is required to be like, putting one step in front of the other emotionally. If you've been through some of these really, we'll just use the word sensitive, meaning severe, harsh, filled with deception, lies, or criticism and judgment. Are these all these sort of heavy sort of things, that people can take on when they're trying to make function a dysfunctional relationship where there's an imbalance. Needs aren't being met. And so then how do you take accountability is really in the healing path. Like, the healing path is taking like accountability for that and stop doing what isn't working, particularly in ways that you were unaware of. So even though it doesn't bother me, what I really could stop doing is, even though, and so you can ask questions here on the channel. I really want to help elicit questions so that can open up your mind to help you make the changes that you can feel good about, even if you're used to being barricading yourself in, insulating yourself in, or trying to, remain in some form of a hiding, or what, because I think sometimes people, they will then mirror sort of, how, what I would call like a narcissistic cocooning, where they just all of a sudden just vanish from their role in the relationship. They're just, meaning a girlfriend, all of a sudden they're not there, or they're very erratic. Same thing, boyfriend, all of a sudden they're not there. Withdrawn, and then just no talk, no communication, as if this is the normal. And it's very difficult to navigate those kind of waters. And it's just kind of like, how can you tell? How can you know? How can you allocate your focus is really kind of like the main thing. And it seems to be sort of like upright, the best you can, and depending on your age and knowing that, is then being able to say, oh, okay, I realize the dynamics. I realize and can make a change, a true shift over, meaning like I, instead of looking to them for reinforcement, that thought completely stops. You're not looking to them for this. You're not looking to them for that, which might have been completely habitual, and your identity once went again caught up in what can become like an obsessive, trying to be the best, trying to be there, trying to accommodate, conform, all these different things, and and just try to make a mountain out of a molehill or whatever it is. You have found yourself basically almost unable to survive even the most basic of relationship stages or states or experiences of being. So I always I feel bad but sometimes you have to realize certain people have a craving and an insatiable need for attention, power, and control, and they will navigate their lives. So that will happen. But what becomes a problem then is when then that type of person, their personality overrides into your space, and you start being dragged into their allegory, their story, meaning you are their victim, you are their cushion, you are their whatever it is that they have made up in their mind, which you are kind of, oh, well, that, and then you think it's something, but it's not. It's something different that they're making in their mind, and they know it, but it's just that they use you to sort of pacify themselves through whatever situation. And it's a difficult thing to comprehend, how they use other people this way, because most people can't really do or behave with those antics. Most people wouldn't have the energy, the thought pattern, the ability, the conscience. They just don't go there. But yet these people tend to sort of scoff at others who don't have this immunity to feelings. Like, in other words, these people who are completely callous or don't have fear or conscience, they think that it makes them superior, above others, and reign above all. Like, so in their processing, they kind of applaud themselves for this, and they can wield it, how they want. So that's the important thing, I think, to learn if you're trying to heal from the triggers. So, like, depending on, the viewers asking, well, how can you help people be more self-aware? Well, realize, what you can do is work for you to become self-aware. Don't be trying to help others become enlightened to themselves. Let them become enlightened to themselves. And that can be, stop challenging people in relationships. If you can share that, how do you share that you how do you share and have a relationship, I guess, without upsetting them or interfering or being too much or too little? So that can be a question that you have to be and actually do some calculating and be okay with, as it stands or as it sits. I mean, basically, and then not being triggered or upset or ruined or devastated, even though part of the story requires sort of this, you're all in it. They tend to really sort of emotionally draft others in. Again, I get down to the energetically, where you're just sort of involved and you don't realize it until you're already in. That's the strange difference. And a lot of people feel very ashamed if they have, been sort of the one drawn in, or, just just sort of fell what they fell for, or weren't privy to, but they were green to, or they have discovered maybe they feel that they were too naive. And not to beat oneself up, but to say, okay, to what degree can I own, knowing this now, how can I go on and not have that trigger still part of me, and that it's not required for me, especially, and then what, for healing, what positive images can I feel, without sort of the, because their wish is sort of like the dagger through the heart. They always want to, there's always a specific feeling, I think that they want to convey, which is entirely up to them. It's just sort of like they're asserting themselves. But, until you realize, are you reinforcing basically more hurt onto yourself is the problem. You cannot, have a certain closeness of contact or communication. It will never be feeling okay, but don't take on someone else's trigger, meaning allow them to get real. I think once you make yourself real to yourself, and then you are yourself just in the moments, then you'll find yourself more effective, efficient, and then you're not wasting time or battling over your decisions or who you are. It becomes once again an existential I am. So if you want to say I am and then fun, lighthearted, then list these things, and then say these things, and then be these things, and then plan where you can enjoy even more of these things, and then letting go of the others. So, but letting go, sometimes, a toxic person is not about the letting go. They have, this is part of their, they want to leave a mark, and, for whatever reason, they have that desire to be unforgettable, and not in the positive, but more in the negative. Meaning they want to leave a mark or an enigma. They want to leave things off the hook, that you can never be resolved. They just will cut out on you whenever. They'll treat you like the best, and then completely different another time. There's a flip side to every manner. You can't expect one and then you will get the other. There's a true Jekyll and Hyde that you don't maybe want to be, compromised by. You don't want to be misguided by. And so you don't have to participate. You can acknowledge, and then validate that knowledge to yourself and say, okay, I understand now. And then have like an immunity, sort of for what they're going to bring, because it's their intent is to kind of communicate in a covert or passive aggressive way, which is sort of beyond just sort of communicating. They and oftentimes it might make people uncomfortable, but they put up with it. And to what degree are you just going to be happy owning who you are and what you are, and not feeling that just going up and down is having the life. For some people, I think, who are into that might be the roller coaster that they want to ride for some time. And it's not for everybody. So it's okay to live an untriggered lifestyle. It doesn't make you boring or unattractive or antisocial, that you don't want to, just because you don't want to fight or have all these sort of judgments, which become the slinging. Maybe you don't want to own, because the judgment is all those things. Judgment from the top down is where it's going to hurt or benefit. And so, but look for, others who are on the side also trying to cut you out for some reason, and it was not your intent, so I am not worried about that. You just have to know that that's part of the playbook and part of what it is. I would say just look at the patterns of relating and be okay with changing them, and then knowing what, instead of that, I'm going to is. So rather than going down into sort of that abyss that you can't change or that you can't help. Instead of that, I prefer to. Instead of that, I decide to. And then interject, I decide. You know, I'm committed to. I'm committed to. My passion is. Instead of that, my passion is. Instead of that, my mission is. Instead of that, I feel best when. I am most whole when. And I now am okay bringing this healing modality into my life. And, you know, even though I don't want to tell myself my new healing modality is, you know, even though I'm afraid to admit it to myself, my best healing modality is, or what I need most is. And then surprise yourself. Just list 1 through 20 and listen, see what you have to say. Just and don't judge it. Don't, you know, it can be travel to Tahiti, start this or that. I mean, just write everything down, because it's all obviously all in there, and part of what's constricting you and your decision making, and what you then tend to do, and then how you then command over these sort of trigger situations, or people who want to have this incessantly. So that's kind of their way of relating. And if you can say, well, that belongs to them, you know, I mean, it's really a different of possession. It's just say that belongs to you, and it doesn't, you know, come off to me. So you don't have to continue to watch any train wreck or find, you know, what happens to this episode, or whatever it is. It's okay to change your mind, change direction, and your I am is all intact. So I think, you know, namely at that I am level, you know, if part of you still is feeling you're jealous, or it's better for someone else, you know, then you really need to look at that, because then you really haven't seen, you know, how the things are functioning and fitting are not for your well-being right now. And it's okay to see that, and it's okay to know what the other direction is and secure that. And then if it's new to you, then you can say, this is new to me. I am excited. I am liberated now that I can, and reframe some of these questions, or some of these negative experiences, you know, from I'm frightened, you know, for the future, to I'm excited to learn something new. I'm excited to expand into something new, you know, and that is a better path for me. And then, or, you know, just reframe that, and then speak that into being your, you know, and get, you know, feel okay with being strong with yourself, and then that will heal. Just stay with it. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Have a beautiful day.